And welcome once again, everybody, to another edition here of the Mass Steel Podcast. So, of course, yours truly, Charles Prodigy Richie, right now, as we are getting ready to count down to less than a couple of weeks. Super Bowl 55 right now in Tampa, Florida, right now, with the Bucs becoming the first team ever this past Sunday, right now, being the first team to host a home Super Bowl in their own stadium right now. TB12, Tom Brady, he's bringing that magic along with him from the Patriots to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think we could say right now. And currently on the line right now, join me here, usual friend of the show. We'll get into some Steeler talk a little bit in just a few moments here. I'm talking about none other than writer for CBS Sports, Bryan DeArdo right here. And if I heard correctly, Bryan, I think you mentioned you're working a little bit of trivia before we got the air. Please excuse the intro before we cut off. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing Charles. If you want, I'm about 35 questions deep into this, 35 Super Bowls deep. Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm picking one trivia question from each Super Bowl. If you want, I could actually give you one
Sure.
from each of the Steelers ones.
Go for it.
All right, so let's start with Super Bowl 9. And any Steeler fan should get all of these, but we're going to test you right out of the blocks, Charles. So the first one, which Steelers defender recorded the first safety in Super Bowl history after spending a week in the hospital with pneumonia?
Easy. I think I remember this one on America's Game documentary. That should be Dwight White right there.
You are correct. Your other options were Joe Green, Elsie Greenwood, or Jack Lambert. So let's move on to Super Bowl 10. Which future Hall of Fame Cowboys player did Jack Lambert famously throw to the ground during the second half of Pittsburgh's 21-17 win? Was it Hollywood Henderson, Cliff Harris, Randy White, or Roger Staubach?
Cliff Harris.
Cliff Harris, you're 2 for 2. 2 for 2. All right, Super Bowl 13. And leading the Steelers to a 35-31 win over Dallas, Terry Bradshaw became the first quarterback in Super Bowl history to throw for over 300 yards, throw 4 touchdowns, not get sacked, A and B, or B and C.
Repeat the choices one more time, please.
Yep, throw for 300 yards, throw for 4 touchdowns, C, not get sacked, D, A, and B, or E, B, and C.
It was definitely A and B combined right there, because I remember that was Terry Bradshaw's also first 300-yard passing in any career game in his NFL career, too, with a record of 4 touchdowns.
Yep, you're exactly right. And so you're 3 for 3.
Hey, third time's a charm, man. Just like Super Bowl 13 right there.
Yep, let's see if we can get you 4 for 4. Are you ready?
Go ahead.
While they fell short against the Steelers, the Rams received a gritty effort from this player who played the game with a broken leg. Your options are Jackie Slater, Jack Youngblood, Vince Ferragamo, or Wendell Tyler.
I am going to take a wild stab in the dark. I want to say.
Now, hey, you can use a 50-50.
Well, you said it was the. I think I'm going to have to go with Jackie Slater, if I'm going to guess.
It's Jack Youngblood.
Oof. Okay.
Jack Youngblood played that game with a broken leg. He broke the leg 2 weeks or 3 weeks prior against Dallas and continued to play on that leg in the Super Bowl. Now, I actually talked to Jackie Slater last year about playing the Steelers at that time, and he discussed ad nauseum how awesome it was to play against Elsie Greenwood. Said that Elsie really wasn't a trash talker. He may have said something like, let's get it on or something like that when the game started, but he said technically Elsie Greenwood was as good as a player as he had ever faced. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Elsie will ever, you might make the Hall of Fame. You never say never. But as of now, it looks like it's going to be a while if and when he ever makes the Hall of Fame. But now, if you want, Charles, I can throw you one more random one from a random Super Bowl of your choice, or we can just skip this and get into your question.
Go for it. I wouldn't mind, man. I'm all for NFL history, especially Super Bowl, one of the favorite weeks countdown. Go for it, man.
Okay, let's do let's do a funny one.
Sure.
before leading his team on a game-winning Super Bowl 23.
Okay.
Before leading his team on a game-winning 92-yard drive.
Are you trying to say which celebrity was in the crowd? If I'm guessing, I don't need to ask. That's the question. John Candy. John Candy. I heard that one so many times, and don't forget too. Remember, Bill Walsh was one of the first people who pointed out with Joe Montana in those drives. He was trying to call a few timeouts during that drive. Joe Montana even later admitted this later on after his career that he used to hyperventilate a lot of times during like drives and huddles like that. So he'd have some like panic attacks once in a while, as tough as he was.
Right. Yeah, you're right. All right, let's see if I can. All right, now I'm gonna try to stump you here. I'm gonna try to get tough since you're killing me here. All right, let's get you a tough one. All right, this is Super Bowl 16. While his team fell short against the 49ers, this quarterback threw for nearly twice as many yards as game MVP Joe Montana. You want some options?
Sure, please.
All right. Ken Anderson, Brian Sipe, Boomer Esiason, or Dan Marino?
It was definitely Ken Anderson.
You nailed it. Ken Anderson, man. All right, well,
don't forget.
I don't think I'm going to stump you.
And don't forget, too, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I also remember, too, if I'm not mistaken, Ken Anderson was also reigning league MVP that year, too, a year after Brian Sipe.
Yes, he was. All right, I'm going to stump you here.
Okay.
I'm out of him after this. Well, I'm not, but I'm going to try to get you on this one. All right. Despite not rushing for a single yard in the second quarter, Terrell Davis led the Broncos to their first Super Bowl after rushing for 157 yards and 3 touchdowns. What caused him to miss most of the second quarter? A migraine headache, a toothache, a jammed thumb, or he was poked in the eye? Those are your 4 options.
I remember. I know it's somewhere between like the migraine and the eye right there, because I remember John Elway was saying, here, I'll guide you when you're running the routes right there.
Right.
And the pull. Right. So pulling teeth on this one.
One or the other. You cut it down to 2. I'll give you that.
I'm going to say I think he got poked in the eye because John Elway had to help him. I don't think it was a migraine. I'm going to say poked in the eye. Migraine. Oof. Okay.
Migraine it because Terrell Davis suffered from migraines since he was 12 years old and forgot to take his medication before the Super Bowl, which you would think of all the games to not know your medication or to take your medication. He just said he had too many other things going on. He totally forgot. And then the second quarter, it kicked in. He got kneed in the head by a Packers defensive lineman, but that triggered it. But it really wasn't that bad of a hit. And then his first carry in the third quarter, he fumbled. That led to a touchdown or a field goal from Green Bay. And then Aaron Sharper famously was mic'd on the sidelines, and he yelled that Davis was scared to run. He wasn't. Davis rushed for almost 100 yards alone in the second half. The Broncos won that one. Well, do you want one more to redeem yourself, or do you want to move on?
Let's try one more. What the heck? Let's just see what happens. Let's go for it.
One more. Let's do a fun one.
Okay.
Get you on a fun one. All right, I'm going to give you an easy one. You want an easy one?
It doesn't matter. Challenging, easy. Wherever you want to pick, I'm willing to ride with you.
You know what? You and me are going to go right. We're going to go right in the middle.
Hey, you know the name of the deal on the show. Every time, whenever you hear before and in and out of the show, if you see that many times, what does Joey Porter always say? Who ride, we ride. So just bring it on, my man.
All right. This is Super Bowl 29. And one of the greatest Super Bowls ever played by a quarterback, Steve Young, led both teams in rushing. He also set the still-standing Super Bowl record for touchdown passes. How many did he score?
6.
Well, you nailed it. You didn't need my options.
He beat Joe Montana's previous record of 5, which was set in Super Bowl 24.
Right. So in the spirit of Super Bowls, Charles, what would you say are your 3? What is your favorite Steelers one, and what is your favorite non-Steelers one?
If I had to say my all-time favorite one, I definitely have to go with Super Bowl 13 as like one of the ones that stood out to me being like a Steelers fan, like definitely right at the top of the list. I remember before ESPN Classic came out a long time ago. I remember you used to see on ESPN2 and just some of the classic documentaries before we used to YouTube this stuff or see it on digital cable. Yeah, it was so good and awesome. The late Harry Callis' voice, by the way, who left us a long time ago, who passed away, former Phillies announcer, but also did some voiceovers for NFL films, commercials right there. I just remember that was one of the first Super Bowls where it really finally started to open up to a shootout. When the first one was pretty much like a defensive contested one right there. So definitely Super Bowl 13 will be like number one all time on my list. And then I think one outside of that Super Bowl, when I really comes to mind, I probably have to go with, let's see. Hold on one second. I would have to say for my other one, I will probably go with, I have to go with Super Bowl 51 in recent memory. As much as all the other ones stand out there, just amazing that still stands out in my mind watching who Brady is, what he's had to overcome, all the controversies, overcome a 25-point deficit right there. That guy is a freak right there for what he did. 25-point deficit. I mean, you had to at least, you were still down by 16 points at one point in the fourth quarter. You still needed touchdowns, 2-point conversion to even tie the game. And not only that, it was the first ever Super Bowl in overtime, as much as Kyle Shanahan, much to his chagrin for two Super Bowls in his career, failed to encourage his team to run the ball. Instead, it keeps passing right there. I just think right there, I thought that was just so awesome right there when a game that should have been way out of hand, just watching the Patriots team chip away at them. And I think they shut out the Falcons in that second half. So they were able to outscore them, I want to say 31-0, I want to say, in that second half. So Super Bowl 51 for me, outside of 13. It was just remarkable to finally see the first one in overtime.
That one was an interesting one to follow covering the Steelers because I was kind of writing all these articles about how I was actually running like a live blog during the game or a photo or a gallery, reaction gallery in real time. And I remember Ryan Shazier was taking great delight in the Patriots losing that game for the most part. Then when they came back to win, and Steeler fans in general were taking great delight in that game until Patriots started coming back, and then all of a sudden, all the Steeler fans disappeared, and Shazier was pretty much laughing at himself. Yeah, that was a weird one. That was it's funny because no one really calls that one the best one ever, even though it went to overtime. Most people, including our own Will Brinson, he thinks that the Seattle New England Super Bowl is the best one he's ever seen. I don't really love the best ever seen argument because I think it just comes down to personal preference. Like I think the New England Rams one should absolutely be up there. I think I'm trying to think here. I think Super Bowl 20. I mean the ones that I remember seeing when I was alive. 32 Broncos Patriots. I'm sorry, Broncos Packers, we discussed a little bit, is up there.
Right.
Rams Titans would have to be up there. Rams Patriots would have to be up there. Panthers Patriots is often forgot because it really wasn't a great game for the first three quarters. And the fourth quarter was crazy. A lot of points, a lot of big plays. Musha Muhammad, big touchdown.
Right.
And then 42, obviously. Oh, and then you got to remember, like we discussed too, and this is one I don't remember, the Bengals 49ers game. That was a great Super Bowl. So interesting. The Browns in the 80s won the 3 AFC Championship games, did not go to a Super Bowl. The Bengals went to 2 Super Bowls and almost won both of them. And both years they had the league's reigning MVP. They just weren't able to quite get it done, but they did go to 2. My favorite one, Charles, you're going to think I'm crazy. My favorite one might be one the Steelers lost. It might be the Dallas one.
Yeah.
Because they played really well. No one expected them to win. And there was a moment in that game, and I firmly believe this. If the Steelers had pulled that game off, I think it would have been their most memorable Super Bowl win. Because it was the only one where they were a double-digit underdog and had no one thought they were going to win the game. And when Bill Cowher made that onside kick with 11 minutes left, everybody was pretty much thought, all right, this is their chance. And then they scored on that drive, and then Kirkland sacked Aikman to force a punt on the next drive. Everybody gives O'Donnell, a lot of criticism for the second interception to Brown, but on the play right before that, Andre Hastings dropped the wide open pass. If he catches that pass, the Steelers have the ball near midfield with a lot of time left, and they probably settle back into their running game at that point. But we'll never know. But that might be my favorite one, just because it opened my eyes up to the fact that anything can happen in the Super Bowl. Even when a team is favored as high as Dallas was, 32 is up there for me too. Terrell Davis, that was a Super Bowl, Charles, that is similar to this one for me. When going into the game, I didn't know who I was going to cheer for, because I liked Brett Favre and I liked that Packers team. And Denver just beaten Pittsburgh in the AFC title game, but I also liked Terrell Davis. And as the game went along, I found myself pulling for Denver because John Elway and the whole thing. And if you want to, this is my last thing here, but if you want to criticize Aaron Rodgers a little bit for what just happened, and not, Green Bay not going for it there on the fourth down, on the play before, Rodgers had a chance to run it, didn't. Rodgers is 37. And for whatever reasons, he chose not to run there. Maybe it was to protect his body. But John Elway, the same age in a Super Bowl, in the same situation, got smashed by 2 or 3 different Packers, fell down and got a first down, and Denver won the game. At some point, you have to lay out if you want to win a Super Bowl. And I think every Steelers fan would agree with me. In that situation, there was no way Ben Roethlisberger was letting his team kick a field goal. He's going to wave off the special teams. He's going to try to go for it. So I gave you a lot to chew on there, Charles, but those are my thoughts on several of those things.
I will say this real quickly with regards to Super Bowl 30 and Bill Cowher. I mean, in his 4th year at that point, as much as we want to, acknowledge Mike Tomlin, all the years he has not had a losing record. And, I mean, you look at a guy who's been there before him, Bill Cowher, who's been there for about 15 years, but a lot of people want to instantly run to the welcoming arms of the tough love of Chuck Noll right there, who went 4-0 in Super Bowls. But I got a fact for you real quick, Brian. You might like this. Check this out. Did you know that Bill Cowher right now, since post-Super Bowl, since coaches who have gotten back to the playoffs after the Super Bowl, you know what Bill Cowher's record is after post Super Bowl and getting back to the Super Bowl and finally winning it, where it's playoffs or just getting back there and winning it? You know what his record is? Yep.
So we're going 96-05. Well, he was 1-1 in 96, 1-1 97, so it's 2-2. He didn't go 98, 99, 2000. He went 1-1 again in 01, so that's 3-3. He went 1-1 again in 02, so that's 4-4. He didn't go in 03. So what is that, 4-4, 5-5?
Yeah, so when he finally did win the Super Bowl, he finished out with 9-5. That's the second most wins post Super Bowl, in the playoffs. So for the years, you know how we look at Mike Tomlin right now. Check this out, because right now, as great as he was, post Super Bowl, in the years he was in the playoffs, 2-4. Now remember, he had a lot of first round exits too in 82 and 83. I mean, but he still won a few, one more playoff game apiece in 84 and 89. And then you got Mike Tomlin right now at this stage of his career. I mean, he's pretty much, I think, been 3-5, I want to say 3-5, 3-6, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think this is each coach, and I think this is the interesting thing, Charles, when you look now at eras, every coach, I think, has to be evaluated differently because, I mean, think about it. In any other era, one Super Bowl win, for Tomlin would be unacceptable. And yeah, there's fans that even now don't think that number is enough. And they're probably right in some regards. But what other coach outside of Belichick has won more than one that's currently coaching? The answer is nobody. The only other coaches that have rings, and I'm probably missing somebody, but Harbaugh, Reed, and Tomlin, just off the top of my head, and John Gruden, obviously, Tampa Bay in 2002. But now coaches that have coached in multiple Super Bowls, it's Reed and it's Tomlin. That's it, and obviously Belichick. So you look at Mike McCarthy, won a ring, but never went back, got fired. You look at John Harbaugh, won one, never went back. So, coaches, again, with the exception of Belichick, it's hard to get back because of salary cap. That's most free agency, and the salary cap is most of that. Every team now, as Urban Meyer said in his introductory press conference in Jacksonville, you're set up to go 8-8. That's the way the NFL is today. And, Chuck Noll back then, if you drafted really well, you're going to mostly keep all your players and you're going to be good. The problem was the Steelers did not draft as well in the 80s as they did in the 70s. They made some mistakes in who they drafted, Dan Marino in 83 being the biggest mistake, and they paid for it. Conversely, the Bengals had better drafts, the Oilers had better drafts, and the Browns had better drafts. And that's what resulted in the Steelers. But even so, the Steelers in the 80s aren't as bad as people remember. They went to an AFC Championship game in 84. They went to the playoffs in 82 and 83. They went to the playoffs at the end of the decade in 89 with a team that started the year losing to Cleveland 51-0, and then Cincinnati 41-10 in consecutive weeks. They won a playoff game and then lost to Denver by a point and almost made it to the AFC Championship game. So, and I think the thing that no one really remembers about Noll was, and Cowher, it's the same for both, they left their predecessors in great shape. Noll admitted after the 91 season that he just didn't have enough energy left, and he told his wife, this is a Super Bowl team. I don't have the energy anymore. So he gave Cowher a very young and talented team. Greg Lloyd, Rod Woodson, Carnell Lake, Neil O'Donnell, Yancey Thigpen, etc. And then, Cowher gave Tomlin a team that was a year removed from Super Bowl. I think Cowher's biggest demise was those AFC Championship losses. I think those were his big. But even then, he lost to teams that ended up winning the Super Bowl, with the exception of San Diego. The other teams he lost to ended up winning the Super Bowl. Tomlin's, I think, biggest disappointment has been how his team's late season collapses the last 4 years.
Yeah.
It's really been, in my opinion, his biggest disappointment. Not losing to Tebow in that game, not losing to Green Bay in the Super Bowl, not the 8-8 seasons after that. I think his biggest problem has been the last 4 years, and specifically 2017. I think that was, and then what happened in 18. I think those 2 years are the biggest black marks on his resume. This year was a tough one, but I don't think it compares to what happened in 17 and 18.
With that being said, when you look at, you look at everything he's done. A lot of times, a lot of people, he always keeps saying the standard is the standard, which we always hear. But a lot of people would also argue too. This team really does draft well, but I think there's a lot of people who are on the verge of panic if it's if you decide to cut ties with Ben Roethlisberger and you don't take a chance with Mason Rudolph, you do well, okay, you'll have a winning record. But if you do bad, somewhere like a 5-11, 6 or 10, you start to tend to think you'll have a better selection in the draft in the first round. Right now, they're slated at 24, but more so on Mike Tomlin right now. Do you feel like right now for him? They're not gonna dismiss him. They're not gonna fire him or anything. They've never done that in the history of the organization. But do you feel like this year for him to be extended? Because remember, he does got an option to pick up in 2022 if they want to keep him around. Do you think it's not just getting to the playoffs, but would you dare say how far would it have to be if it's not a Super Bowl, maybe to the conference championship in addition to making the playoffs? What's the feel on Tomlin in your eyes?
I think it's all about. It is all about winning the Super Bowl. That's what they say. The standard is the standard. So it's all about winning the Super Bowl. That being said, to me, it's more about the trajectory of the team. So if they win the Super Bowl, obviously they accomplished their goal. Nothing else has to be said. Even if they get to a Super Bowl, they obviously reach the summit. If they make an AFC Championship game, again, I would say that it depends how they lose the game. If they go and how it unfolds. If it was a team that may not have been the most talented, but overachieved and got there and fell short, that's okay. But if it's a team that maybe started 11-0 again and kind of fell apart at the end and barely got to it and lost, that's a different story. I think again, if you don't get to a Super Bowl or win it, then the next question is, all right, well, are we trending in the right direction? So you look at the 18th season, you look at the end of the 17th season, lose to Jacksonville, very disappointing. But okay, what's the trajectory? Are we heading in the right direction? And at that time, it appeared that they were. Even with the loss to Jacksonville, the thought was, okay, they have all the pieces here still to make a run, assuming Le'Veon comes back. He didn't come back. They had all those off-field distractions. Antonio, at that point, was unraveling, and they missed out on the playoffs. And that was, at that point, the trajectory was down. And Tomlin really in hindsight, needed a rebound season in 19, and he did. Then getting hurt, still figuring out a way to get to 8-8 was encouraging. So at the end of last year, the trajectory was pointing back up. And even at the end of this season, I think the trajectory is pointing up, with the exception of they're going to go through a transition. And I think that's the big question mark. Because, yeah, even though they lost in the first round, 12 wins is 12 wins. And, Ben Roethlisberger, showed that he can come back from that elbow and play well. And that defense is still good when healthy. Bud Dupree's the big question mark. But I think, Charles, I do think they need to make some noise in the playoffs. I don't think another year of not making the playoffs is going to sit well in Pittsburgh at all.
No, but like I said, I do believe it's not just also getting to the playoffs, but I think he has to make a good run in the playoffs. I don't think you want to sell for another one and done and then looked at with this image that, okay, how
let me ask you this. Let's say the Mason is the quarterback, and they win a playoff game with Mason Rudolph under center, and then maybe lose to the Chiefs in the second round. How would you rate that outcome if that was to happen?
I think that would have to be. I would have to give it like a 7, to be honest with you, because for one, right there, you would have finally Mike Tomlin will be able to answer the question that you can win without Ben Roethlisberger. He has opportunity about almost like 2 seasons ago, since the new season will start in 2019, when you lost Roethlisberger at halftime in that game versus the Seahawks. And what was the story the rest of the way right there? I mean, they were 8-5. We talked about December collapses a few moments ago right there. Obviously, the defense was gassed at that point. I mean, they were playing their balls off right there. And you still had like a little bit of a question mark at quarterback. Mason Rudolph was not so much the same ever since he had that incident with Myles Garrett. He had Devin Hodges now.
Even before that, Earl Thomas sent him in next week. He was really never the same after that, to be honest. I think, here's the issue with Ben, and it's very unfortunate that we're reaching a point where now fans are starting to wonder, should he come back? And that's a place that you don't want to go to as a quarterback. Even Peyton had gotten there with the Broncos his last season. You don't want to, and Rivers reached there before he came back and had a nice year this year. That's why I'm glad to see Rivers Rivers is 100% going out on his own terms, and I think that's really all he wanted. He kind of got thrown out of Los Angeles.
Yeah,
and I think he needed to have one redemption season and go out on his own terms. And I'm kind of hoping Ben does the same. Because I do think Ben's going to come back. And I think a lot of it is, A, he wants to honor his contract. And B, he still thinks this team has potential. And C, he wants to have a redemption. And, 11 games into this season, it still was in some ways a redemption season for him. Like, he still had a good year by any measurements. But they lost in the wild card round. They lost to the Browns. He threw 4 interceptions. And he did show signs of serious aging when the ball was fumbled and he couldn't jump on it. So, yeah, I think for him, perfect case scenario, he comes back and has a redemption season, finishes strong, and has some playoff success, and then can go out on his own terms. But I will say this, and I know that now some quarterbacks are playing into their 40s. I'll be honest, I just don't see a bunch of quarterbacks doing what Brady's doing. Brady's a unicorn. And yes, players can play later in their careers because, most of them are taking better care of their bodies. The game now is set up where quarterbacks are going to get less than they ever have. But Father Time's undefeated, and it's going to take just being older and all those hits and all those throws and reps. That still will take a toll on you. So I don't know. I don't see Ben Roethlisberger being 40 years old and still being a really good quarterback. I mean, I just don't. You already saw it this year. His lack of mobility did hurt the team, and this is the part that I'm going to say, and I don't think a lot of Steelers fans want to hear it, but it's the truth. I don't think Mason Rudolph I don't think the Steelers are any worse off with Mason Rudolph than they are with Ben. I really don't. Because the main question with Rudolph is, can he win the games when the big games when they're on the line? Ben Roethlisberger has proven to do that time and again. You saw with the Colts, he did that this year. He didn't do it in Cincinnati and didn't do it in Buffalo, but he did it in that game. Can Mason Rudolph, and that's what Mason and Doug couldn't do in 19 in December. When the going gets really rough, are you going to stand tall? Because, the playoffs do start technically in January, but they really start in December. They start in December when you're playing other teams that also have playoff ambitions, and the level of competition rises very, considerably. So, but yeah, I don't think they're any worse off with Mason Rudolph than they are with Ben Roethlisberger. And Mason can move. Mason is just as accurate as a thrower as Ben is. He's just as accurate. His decision making is probably just as good at this point. So I hate saying it, but that's just what I think.
Not only that, but I would also add to that too. You also saw that year when Ben was out and the defense was pulling a lot of sledding too. You also seen the offense seem to come more together. Like the run game and stuff. The run game still had its issues, but you saw them play more like a unified unit, like really trying to block for each other. And that's the problem I think with Ben Roethlisberger. I think there's a lot of things where he still feels like he has to put the weight of the world on his shoulders right there. When you cause like 3 out of 4 turnovers or 4 turnovers in that game versus the Cleveland Browns, yeah, obviously you're not going to see much of the run games. You need some quick scores to try and make that game if possible, which they almost did for a brief moment. Much a lot of people would argue the missed 4-for-1 call. So I would definitely add that the difference if you have a guy like anyone other than Ben Roethlisberger, like a Mason Rudolph.
I will say this about Tomlin that I've never seen before is that they had a glaring problem on their team, and they never got it addressed. The running game was a glaring problem, and all year Tomlin said, "We're going to fix it. We're going to improve on it." It never happened. And if I go back to 2015, their passing game or pass defense was among the worst in the league. But as the year went on, they figured out ways to get better and disguise some of their issues in the back end. And they made some changes. They played Willie Gaymore. They gave Antoine Blake, if you remember him, more reps. And they did some different things. They used Shazier more. This team, with the running game, they never fixed it. And that's a lot of that's on Tomlin because Kevin Colbert, and the offensive line coach, obviously, who they didn't retain. But the fact that they could not fix the running game really speaks volumes. And as Tomlin said during his season-ending press conference, he said he was open to some philosophical changes there because, in my opinion, I think they should try to do maybe some more zone running like what Kyle Shanahan does and what you'll probably see in New York with Robert Saleh, or Saleh there. So, they have to fix the running game. And the fact that like you said, I mean, Ben did have way too much on his plate in those games because defenses knew exactly what the Steelers were going to do, and there was zero plan B. It was throw short was plan A, and plan B was throw deep. I like Matt Canada going to offensive coordinator. I like the fact that they're going to get another offensive line coach. And yeah, they're going to have to, they're probably going to have to draft a defensive line or an offensive lineman in the first round because they have to get more talent on the offensive line.
And don't be surprised too. At the bottom of the list, we see an outside linebacker drafted too. I mean, I know the jury's still out on Alex Highsmith. He was a good touch, but only time will tell. I think that'll be the bottom of the list. But real quickly, right now, there's a lot of quarterbacks on the market right now. Adam Schefter listed about 15 of them. I'm going to give you like the top 5 that stand out right now. And you let me know out of these 5, how many of these quarterbacks will definitely be in new teams in 2021. We'll start off right now. The Deshaun Watson sweepstakes right now seems to be lying out of the Texans organization right now, carrying a cap hit of $15.94 million for 2021. Of course, Aaron Rodgers right now, we're not sure once he gets settled in, is he going to step away, retire, or maybe he decides to work out a trade somewhere else right now. Also, too, Matthew Stafford right now, the new Lions coach who's come into the organization, he's come in with the understanding that Matt Stafford, more likely, he's not going to be in their plans, that they're going to try and move on from this guy, probably deal him. And then right now, you also got Dak Prescott right now, a very frustrated quarterback who's been seeking a long-term deal. He's got a cap hit of over $31.4 million. And that would be it. So I say about 4 quarterbacks off that list. Who would you say will be more than likely on the move, or will they stay? All those 4. No,
Prescott, who's the 4th?
No, it was actually Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford, and Dak Prescott.
Well, Watson, unless he threatens to sit out, I think he has to stay put. Again, unless you know Stafford's leaving because the Lions have mutually agreed they're going to trade him, so he's going to get traded. I do think that Matt Ryan is done in Atlanta. We're not sure yet, but I think he's done. I did not think that for a while, but I'm starting to think that. I'm probably 60-40 on Matt Ryan. I mean, I'm 100% on Stafford, and I'm 50-50 with Deshaun Watson because again, at the end of the day, I could see whoever is their new coach talk to him and say, hey, I know there's been some things that have happened in this organization, but I want to work with you, and I think we can make this work. I don't think it's totally over with Deshaun Watson. I'm going to put him at 50-50. I think that Dak is 70-30 staying in Dallas. I'd be surprised if Dallas let him go. And I think one of the main reasons why is the injury, and I think Jerry Jones feels the responsibility to pay him. There's also the emotional ties that Jerry has with him. And also, he's the guy they picked to replace Romo. So in order to justify that decision, they probably need to keep him, right? I mean, the issue with Dallas is, in my opinion, they need to find somebody for Zeke. The problem is no one's going to take that contract. So they might be better releasing him and eating the money. I mean, and that's the problem that the Jets had with Le'Veon, is that you pay a guy a running back that much money, you're in trouble. And that's where, I wouldn't be totally shocked if Connor's back in Pittsburgh, because the market for running backs is all over the place. I mean, you saw Austin Eckler sign, was it 4 or 5 years for $24 million, which is, I thought, a great deal for him, 15 up front. You saw Melvin Gordon, I think, do 2 years for 16, 13 up front in Denver. Good contract. So, I could see Connor potentially doing something like that if the Steelers want him back. Juju's as good as gone. Now, if Ben retires, they could maybe try to sign Dupree. But my concern with that is you've got to pay Watt. As good as Dupree is, do you really want to be paying top dollar for 2 outside linebackers? I personally don't.
Well, you know what? Speaking of the Bud Dupree, real quickly, and I promise I'm gonna wrap up here about like with two more after this, but real quickly, John Clayton, who was actually on 93.7 The Fan, who usually interacts with him a lot from 710 ESPN Seattle, he says that he expects Bud Dupree to sign a 1 year deal in the neighborhood of $6 million this offseason, mainly because of the ACL and low salary cap this season. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And you could see several players in the league doing that because of the low salary cap and wanting to kind of wait for next year. I mean, you could see Juju doing that.
Ask guys to bite the bullet for 1 year to hold off until we could straighten out with the cap.
It is unfortunate, and I know nobody's probably going to be crying for Dupree because he has gotten paid handsomely in his career, but it is a shame, though, how much gymnastics he has to hurdle through to get a second contract. I will say this, that is kind of, and that's where I did agree with Le'Veon Bell back in the day, because the Steelers, now again, I mean, Le'Veon also, it takes two to tango, so, Le'Veon needed to meet the Steelers halfway, but it's really hard for players to get that second contract, because teams can franchise them literally as many times as they want. They can put the fifth-year option on them if you're a first-round pick. So, no, I could definitely see that with Dupree. But to me, yeah, that's great for next year. But what is your plan after that? But that would help them, obviously, for next year, because then you wouldn't have to worry about Highsmith having to step in and be a starter full-time.
Also, too, we were speaking with NFL writer of CBS, Bryan DeArdo, real quickly. We also got the Hall of Fame coming up, too, the day before the Super Bowl right now. Which, real quickly, of these finalists right now, these three names you see would be more likely to get in? Or would you select two out of three of these names? I'll go with the homeboys first right now. You got cornerback and safety Rondé Barber, who's been around for quite a long time. Right there, a very phenomenal player, in my opinion, who served his dues. He played about 16 years in the NFL, last since 2012. Right there, he's been a five-time Pro Bowler, three-time All-Pro, and a Super Bowl champion, just like his partner in crime, John Lynch. Remember, who played the first half of his career with the Bucs before he went to the Broncos. Nine-time Pro Bowler, two-time All-Pro, however. And then last but not least, the guy who's been knocking on the door for a long time since being retired after the 2010 season, over a decade right now, 10 years later, Alan Faneca. So again, between Rondé Barber, John Lynch, and Alan Faneca, would you say two out of three or one or the other? Who would be your choice to see finally get enshrined in Canton?
I would go with Lynch. He was an all-decade performer. His body of work speaks for itself. And the fact that he went to New York and helped them get to an AFC Championship game was also a part of his career that sometimes gets overlooked. He was arguably the best lineman at his position in his era. And, when you're all decade, to me, that is about, because we always say, because there really is no benchmark for being in the Hall of Fame, with the exception, if you look back at history, just about, look at the 70s, for example. Every single person on the NFL's all-decade team for the 70s is in the Hall of Fame, with the exception of Drew Pearson. He's about to get in. So, now, small trivia question that you may not have known. Levon Kirkland is actually a member of the NFL's all-90s team and is not in the Hall of Fame. And Greg Wood is not on that team because I think most people didn't like Greg Wood. But regardless, that typically seems like the benchmark to make the Hall of Fame. Were you an all-decade guy? Because if you were an all-decade guy, that meant you were either the best or the second best guy at your position for a decade. So I would say Lynch for sure should be in the Hall of Fame. As you said, 9-time Pro Bowler, was really good on some Buccaneers teams that weren't good. And I actually rewatched for a project highlights of the 0-2 Bucs yesterday. Yeah. That whole team was really good. That defense was great. And if you compare them to the Baltimore defense, I would pick Tampa's over Baltimore's. They were better in my opinion. Derek Brooks, I think as good as Ray Lewis was, I think that he's a little overrated, and I think that Derek Brooks was a little underrated. And they had Warren Sapp. That defense was nasty. Ronde Barber was good, but I kind of put him in the Hall of Very Good and not the Hall of Fame. I know he played a long time and won a ring, had that awesome play at the 0-2 NFC title game, but to me, he was just a level below a Hall of Famer. To me, you shouldn't have to debate a Hall of Fame guy. He just, in my opinion, you know right away. And I just, for my money, I didn't think he was a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah, and don't forget, too, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, speaking of that defense, number one all-time in any Super Bowl team, their release record 9 takeaways for their scoring offense on defense right there, 9. So you had, in that season, you had 5 during the regular season and 4 in the playoffs. Remember, if you watch that NFL Films highlight, what did John Gruden say to that Bucs team when he took over for Tony Dungy, who got dismissed? He said, exactly, challenged him real quickly. Speaking of the Super Bowl, before we wrap you up, Bud, real quickly, Chiefs, Bucks, who takes it all? And by the way, real quickly, another historical question. Not historical, but in a way, but AFC and the NFC since the AFL. 27. Yeah, tied at 27 apiece real quick. Right. Which team wins it for their league? Who breaks the tie? AFC or NFC? Chiefs or Bucks?
I think we're going to win. And the reason why I think that is actually it's going to be out tomorrow. I looked back at the last 4 games between Mahomes and Brady. Now, albeit 3 of those games Brady was on the Patriots, but I think I give the Bucs the edge because I think their road to the Super Bowl is harder, and that doesn't always determine who's going to win it. But usually, the team that's more battle tested comes out on top. And it was true last year with the Niners and Chiefs. The Chiefs had a little bit tougher of a road, and I think Brady with this team has more weapons to spread the wealth to. Scotty Miller, if Antonio Brown's healthy, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, both their tight ends, obviously Gronk being one of them. Tyler Johnson, the rookie from Minnesota, starting to come on. And since their week, I think they played in week 12, that was the last game that Leonard Fournette didn't start. Fournette has started every game since, and he's been a huge difference maker for them. I just think that, and then you look at Tampa Bay's defense, their linebacking core is playing well. Their secondary is somewhat of a weakness. But if Antoine Woodfield is back, they should be okay. But their front 7 is really good. Shaq Barrett, JPP, Sue, Devin White, they're good. That's really Levante David. I just think Tampa's front 7 is really good, and I think they're going to give the Chiefs some fits. The Chiefs offensive line's not going to have Eric Fisher. Stephen Wisniewski's actually probably going to start, the former Steeler. And I don't know. I don't think that the Chiefs running game is as good. And late in that Buccaneers-Chiefs game in the regular season, the Buccaneers made it a 3-point game with 4 minutes left, and the Chiefs iced the game. They ran the clock out, but Mahomes had 2 design runs on that last drive for first downs. With his turf toe, with his recent injury to his neck, how much are they going to have Mahomes run? I don't think they're going to have him run as much. The Chiefs have weapons. Tyreek Hill has been, he had a huge game, obviously, against Tampa, back in week 12. And, they're going to have Clyde Edwards-Helaire back, and Tyrann Mathieu, really good defensive player, D4, Chris Jones. I just think that Tampa has more weapons and better defense, and I think that Tom Brady's the equalizer. I think that obviously Mahomes is still the better – at this time, Mahomes is the better player. But I think it's close, and I think that Brady's going to get his 7th and final ring.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. That's what I got myself too. Bryan, I just wanted to say thank you very much, as always, being generous with the time real quick. And also wanted to thank you and Jim Wexel in person right now. Thanks for the recommendation on Troy Polamalu book. I definitely got to check it out. I just got mine this past Friday. Can't wait to read into that a little bit.
Dude, my pleasure. And yeah, enjoy the book. Yeah, I Jim wrote it, so I deserve no credit for that. But yeah, it's an awesome book. I loved it. I think every Steeler fan should read it, especially in the off season when you don't have anything to do. It's a great book, and I think you'll like it.
All right. Well, my man, thank you very much. Continue to stay safe and healthy for all this COVID time until this thing lasts. And look forward to catching up with you, my man, in the future. You take care and keep up the great work. Thanks a lot, Bryan.
You too, Charles.
Thanks. Take care. Have a good night, man.
You too, buddy.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And once again, that was Bryan DeArdo right there of CBS Sports right there. He's right there online. Still catch him online, too, on his interactions on Facebook Live with his company right there. I definitely feel like it's very interesting right now, to say the least. I mean, you got a lot of stuff going into this game right now. And like I said, too, I mean, one of the biggest things, too, speaking back to Steelers right now, Bud Dupree, according to Dale DK Pittsburgh Sports, on his injury and his rehab right now, he says, "I'm feeling great right now." And, quote, "I'm ahead of schedule in rehab. It's a great thing as always. It's a blessing. I'm on track, and I'm going to be ready for camp. It's a blessing to take the small things from a big injury like there was, and just know that I'm still able to perform next season." I will say this, John. We saw Bud Dupree's reaction on Twitter with laughing and crying emojis right there. So I'm not sure if he's really too much of a fan of the idea of taking a 1-year, $6 million signing right there. So I don't know if that's going to fly well with him. But to be honest here right now, when you got the tag coming up, the Steelers are willing to place a second tag on him, you're looking at about $17.6 million according to Dale Lally. Now, we have heard when you do tag someone for 2 consecutive years, and he's been making over $15 million a year ago. I think $15.828 million. It's usually supposed to be around 1.2% of that money right there. So a little thrown off on there, but that's what we got. And also, too, in regards to Ed Bouchette right now, he tends to think that the Steelers dropped the ball as far as with the ruling rule, as far as more particular with the offense quarter position. He seems to indicate that that Matt Canada was already going to be getting the job, but Tomlin had to interview 2 other men for the coordinator's position, both people of color. But it seems like the whole narrative that was paying along that either way he was going to get the job, they had to do their due diligence, make sure they're interviewing people. Ed Bouchette seems to think that may be a little bit of a concern right there, a bad look for the organization and Tomlin for that moment, if that happens to be true or not. So we'll find out on that. But anyway, that's going to wrap it for a close of this edition here on the Mass Steel Podcast. Bryan, thank you very much, man. Awesome trivia stuff. I appreciate it, man. Definitely reviewing people with you doing this. And thank you very much for your generous time as always. We're counting down the Super Bowl 55 in Tampa. Yes, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they are going home. And speaking of going home, you catch me here on Mondays and Wednesdays, usually at 6:30 or 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I'll keep you guys posted. You guys can follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, at Project Richie for the Mass Steel Podcast, on Twitter at Mass Steel CGR, and on Instagram at Mass Steel Nation. For my man Bryan DeArdo on Twitter and Instagram at Bryan DeArdo. As always, leave it. Don't be trolling, be rolling. Here we go, serious. Here we go. I gone.